Good day, everybody. Danny Rains here again. It's good to be back with you on the Voice of Experience. I love that name. But anyway, I have no script this morning. I have not written an article for IP Magazine for what we're going to talk about this morning. And I'm doing it for the simple reason of what I know that has happened in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I've had people, my customers, and I've had other customers call me, and then I've had other people call me, and I'm going, well, it's 100 days of summer. That's what it is. The 100 days of summer always represent the worst time of the year for things to happen. May 20th through about September the 10th is about 100 days, and if all the folks that takes care of OSHA records and workers' comp cases were to look, they would see that about 60% of everything that happens all year long happens in less than 1/3 of the year in that 100 days of summer. And I've pushed that always. I've done it ever since the Georgia Highway Patrol actually adopted that program back in the 90s. And I started looking around where I worked, and that's what I found. I found the same thing. And it peaks in the middle of the 100 days of summer, and then you have another peak of accidents and things around the holidays between Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is understandable because of, the distractions of the holidays and whatever's going on, deer hunting and whatever else is on people's minds. Which brings me to the topic today. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to share with you what I have found out. And maybe, if anybody has a solution, I would love a phone call or an email to help me understand why things are happening the way they are. Because it's just amazing to me. Of course, it's been going on forever. There was I think it was EPRI, or was it by NIOSH? It might have been NIOSH. They did a little research program back in the mid-90s up to mid-2000s, and they said, oh, well, here we go. The average fatality rate for linemen or line technicians, call them whatever you want to call them, but us, people call you linemen, line techs, whatever. But anyway, the average was about 24 to 28 fatalities a year. Well, that's amazing because that's been going on forever. And it actually got worse prior to 94, before we had the OSHA regulations come in. And then folks really started trying to work according to the regulations. So up until then, we only had our safety manuals that each company had, which was not consistent. There was some consistency in there, but the real inadequacies here still contribute to the most accidents today. I just looked up, Forbes magazine has said this for years now. I know since 2015, but in 2024, Forbes magazine said line workers, it's the 10th.
I think you muted yourself, Danny.
Really? I don't think so.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Right at Forbes magazine, start right before that. You'll be good.
Okay. Well, I didn't do anything, but maybe the Comcast did something. Forbes magazine in the 2024 edition, they came out with a prognostication too, that it was basically line workers are the 10th most dangerous occupations there is, considering we're the highest trained, most trained. To get journeyman classification in line workers, it takes longer than it does for any other classification in construction work to get journeyman, whether it's an electrician, whether it's a low voltage electrician, or whether it's a plumber or carpenter. I don't care what it is, brick mason. But yet we had the highest number of fatalities per 1,000 workers, and which I thought was amazing. And that's this year. That's the 2024 estimation. Well, why do we have the highest number of fatalities per 100 or about 1,000 workers? And they've made that decision. And that's the fascinating part about all this is, well, let me just share with you a couple of things, a few things that's happened recently. And it's just beyond me. Of course, it really is an indication too of what the problem is. So, and I'll rely on you folks out there in the radio world to take this information, do your own research, and come back and tell me why or what your opinion is. That'd be great. That'd be a great project right there. And I usually do a little research, and provide the information to people. A friend of mine was traveling through a small town, and he called me. He told me, he says, "Let me tell you what this journeyman lineman told me." Well, as he was driving down the street, he looked up, just like all of us do. We spend more time looking at poles and wires than we do where we're going a lot of times. But he looked up and saw this lineman, and he was transferring a 3-phase pole for wood arm construction, and was actually I think he had 2 guts, and that's all he had up there. And he had moved those 2 guts from one phase to another and stand in between hot phases and do all kind of stuff. He didn't even have a split blanket around the P6 pin, I9 insulator, whatever he had, to actually guard against the tie wire hitting the arm or something. And of course, my friend, he says, "Well, that's kind of stupid. I think I'm going to go talk to him." So he turned around and went back. And he pulled up and he started talking to him. And he said, "Can you come down? Let me talk to you a minute." He said, "Well, sure." So he dropped down in the bucket truck and he asked him and said, "Well, look, I was looking at your cover up, and you basically, you didn't have enough up there, brother." He said, why are you willing to do that? Why are you willing not to cover up to ensure that you can do it safe? But I'm that good, is what this lineman said. I don't need that extra cover, is what the lineman said. If I needed extra cover, I would need more experience, is what the lineman said. And of course, with that, he just got in the truck and left. Said, "Good luck, brother. Take care of yourself." That shows one thing for sure, okay, is that you can do things against the rules and regulations, not wear all your PPE. Now, he had rubber gloves on, of course, but not wear everything you're supposed to wear, not use everything you're supposed to use to protect you while you're doing this work, and you still get away with it. In other words, there's no, from a leadership perspective and a human performance perspective, there's no negative consequence for a poor performance, which actually leads to other poor performance, I believe, in the long run. How do you fix that? Well, only human performance measures and leadership can fix that. Well, believe it or not, that was 2 weeks ago. I have a picture in my cover-up program that I took myself from a group of contractors working for a big utility. We'd gone to Florida for a vacation and walked out of a restaurant, and I looked up and I said, "Oh my God, look at this." And this gentleman was there was 2 of them up there. And basically they, it was so alarming when I first looked up there. They had insulators not covered. They had guts on phases. Okay. That's understandable, but there was no insulators covered. He also had a polymer insulator underarm hanging down. What they were doing was laying off and getting ready to pull in reconduct. We're going to pull in 3 new phases. So they were just kind of setting everything off out of the way. There was a stirrup that had been squeezed on a phase that was right at the end of his boom, okay, his bucket, and it wasn't covered. And of course, I looked up there and I asked him, I said, "Hey, Bubba, come here, let me talk to you. You got a minute?" "Oh, yeah, yeah." "Well, we're going to talk for a stump if it talk back." Well, he dropped down and I had a very similar conversation with him. Now, this conversation is very much like the last one I just told you about, but this conversation occurred about 2002, 22 years ago. Okay. And of course, the picture's in my training program that I use it today. And it just goes to show you again. I asked him, I said, well, I was looking, and he didn't even have rubber gloves on, much less sleeves and gloves or nothing else, you know. And so he's up there, minimum approach is being violated. His bucket was almost in contact with a hot stirrup, 7,200 volts, hot stirrup. And they're up there just working around and not concerned at all about what I was looking at. And he dropped down and I said, "Well, look, I'm Danny Raines. I do this and train for that. And I work for this company and blah, blah, blah." And we sit there and shot the bull for a minute. And then I said, "Well, look, you cover up there, brother. It looks to me like you might need some, and you didn't even have your rubber gloves on, and you were within minimum approach of that exposed, energized part." And he looked straight at me and he says, "I got enough cover, and I'm not going to touch that energized part." I said, and I said, "Brother, about 25 people a year get killed not intending on actually touching a hot face, but yet they do." So I said I was just a little bit concerned, and I wanted to share that concern with you. And, it is what it is. And he just went right on back up there. Now, just to show you, as I said earlier, you can work unsafe, what's considered unsafe by industry and regulatory standards, and with no negative consequence. Because I went back by there later. They finished that pole. They never did put any more rubber up there, and nothing happened. Which, again, that to me leads to, increasing poor performance, or willing to, well, as I teach in human performance, just called risk drift. The amount of risk that we're willing to take on is really dependent on the likelihood and probability of something happening. And if it does, the severity of whatever the event is that occurs. So, and that's the driving factor here for all of this. And that is very disturbing to me. As you well know, and I think I've mentioned before, myself and Jim Vaughn and others, we're called a lot of times in court cases, and there's a lot of things that we just are asked for opinions on. We get deposed, and sometimes we wind up on the witness stand, and we talk, and the plaintiff's attorney will cross, and then the defense attorney will ask, and we have to explain what the regulations say and what the intent of that regulation is. And it's very difficult to do. I mean, our standard, 1910-269, is in subpart R of general industry, which is special industries for a reason. And it's because it's so technical, but it's got to be a very disciplined atmosphere that we work in order to prevent a lot of things from happening. And it just don't happen a lot of times. Well, that's two things. And now then, one of my guys was out teaching a class this past week, and he called me and he said, "Danny," he says, "we had, and this just happened." And it's happened before because we use this in our grounding program. I think, other than energized work and proper cover up being one of the most highly events that can happen, and it's very catastrophic when it does happen, either the flash or the contact, because we lose body parts, we burn people up, we do a lot of things when this happens, and the system don't care. it keeps right on going. You may lock it out or something for a second, but it's going to come right back. But anyway, he said that there was an incident that occurred this week, and they were almost 2 fatalities. And I said, wait a minute. And I said, we've been working with a company for a very long time, teaching system grounding and distribution cover-up. That's usually the 2 things that people want. And sure enough, and I think this part of the grounding program is one of the most misunderstood, and that's induction. People, a lot of linemen today do not understand inductive voltage. If you're in a parallel circuit, even when they rewrote the standard in 2014, basically they actually changed the Q2 part of that because of the way it was written. And I think in this case right here, this was nothing more than just working in a substation. So let me tell you about that first, and then we'll get back to Q24. In that substation, they were working, near an energized bus, but there was also a bus that had been switched out and grounded at a remote location somewhere farther away. But the gentleman that was affected was basically in a JLG. It was a metal basket, a work platform, non-insulated lifting device, And so they were standing there, and obviously they did not bond the metal bucket to the bus that they were working on, but yet their truck was grounded, and so was the bus, but it was grounded in 2 locations to where now you've got circulating current. And now then there's a difference of potential between the truck and the bus. And, like I said, I use an example very similar to this in our grounding program, and it's taught. But yet these 2 guys, and I'm not real sure they had been in the class yet or where they were new hires, but that very well could have been 2 fatalities right there. It turned their lights out. They fell in the bottom of the bucket. Had they not fallen out of it, I'm not real sure that they would have lived through it. I don't know the details. I'm sure I'll find out later because I'm going to talk to their manager and just following up. I want to know, the main thing I really want to know is, have they been in that class? Because if they had been in that class, that exact topic was covered. My advice to avoid stuff like this is always bond. Grounding, and Jim Vaughn, and me and Jim, we're kind of, brothers from different mothers, but we march to the same drummer, and we sing the same songs and tell the same stories. Grounds never saved anybody's life. Grounds operate systems. That's exactly what the standard says. That's what IEEE said. And the requirement for it, operate the system as fast as you can, but also lower the potential differences in the work area by bonding. So you got to have grounds and bonds. And, I'm not sure everybody in the world agrees with that, but, if they don't, they wind up like the 2 guys laying in the bottom of that dang bucket. So you think about that for a few minutes. So that just happened. So there's 2 or 3 incidents right there that just really bugs me. And that's been going on for quite a while. The cases that I've had, and back to Q24 before I forget to go back there. The inductive part that people don't understand, there's 3 factors that will determine the amount of inductive voltage that's on a de-energized line. If you're working in a parallel corridor, or if you're working on an underbuild, if you're working on something that's been switched out, and it may be grounded. Now, where it's grounded has got a whole lot to do with it, because what the standard in 1994 said before they changed Q24, and that is working in parallel corridors, is that the ground shall be placed on it, and they shall not be more than 2 miles between grounds, which would put you within a mile. You couldn't be more than a mile from a set of grounds. Well, guess what happened? A mile was too far, because if you're in contact with that grounded conductor, bus, whatever on this, whatever you're working on, and there's a difference potential between you and whatever you're touching, that's not a good. That's induction. The length of exposure, the distance from the energized part to the de-energized part. Okay, those are the two main factors right there. Exposure, distance, voltage. How long are you parallel? How far is it an underbuild? How far away the grounds are, because a lot of people still bracket ground, which, if you bracket ground, that's fine. But the bracket grounds are not going to be the 100% save your rear end that I was taught years ago. That's all I had to do. No, it's not. No, it's not. There's a lot of factors goes in there. You're in an insulated aerial device, or you're in a Class A or a Class B bucket. All that stuff plays in. The part that really is so interesting and is so important to me is whatever you're standing on, whatever you're doing, and whatever you're going to touch needs to be at the same potential. Well, I'm in an insulated bucket. I don't have to do that. Really? I will give you a short story of another incident occurred on another system, and it's 765 kV, which I've never done anything with that, but a 500 is hot enough, but 765 is it's amazing. Even in a switched out bus, okay, in a substation, a 765 kV substation, in a this was an insulated aerial device, 2-man bucket, and basically these guys were up there working, and it was amazing, because they could stand in that bucket and touch that bus, and they were getting them P. Rooney knocked out of them, and they, of course, a lineman's going to figure out how to do this, and one way or another. They actually took an equipotential mat, grounding mat, put it in the bottom of the bucket, and then threw the tail over the bus of the clamp, and actually made contact there. That put the bus and them standing on that equipotential blank at the same potential. Of course, we looked at it, and then we also made a suggestion in there that they ought to just take a ground and tie to the lip of the bucket and go over there to it and see what happens. Well, it's an insulated bucket, 5-glass bucket, and it doesn't matter. Double A 755, I don't care. Just try and see. Guess what? It made it fine. They didn't have another problem with it. Didn't have to put that equipotential mat in the bottom of the bucket either. There's a lot of things that can happen out there in the real world. And when we don't realize and we don't understand, which really brings me to a point, I think that some basic understanding, basic electrical knowledge is missing somewhere in the training programs. I know we all get it, whether we hear it or whether we believe it. I don't know. It's not showing up in the workplace. I know that there was another fatality in the last week or two that I heard of, and I've heard that there was another one. Why does it keep happening? That's the question I'm asking. Why does stuff like this keep happening? And I've had probably 25 cases in the last 15 years to where I've had to be deposed in or either testify in court in. And every one of them, when I read the accident report or the OSHA investigation, it becomes so obvious what the problem was, what the omission was, what the failure of the employee. I hope they didn't do stuff like this on purpose. I don't know, but I think it was not recognized. If a hazard is not recognized, like induction, then what is it? Do you not know about it, or do you not understand it? And I think the understanding part, the why behind the what, and that's what I've always tried to get to people, is to understand the why of what's going on. And I know there's some controversy about asking why a lot, but to do that in a positive manner for information, it probably needs to be in training a long time before it gets to the field. But again, too, when accidents do happen and things do happen out there, that why it happened, we know what happened, obviously, because an accident occurred or an incident occurred. But why? What part of the understanding did we not get? I know I could carry on this for another hour and talk about some of the cases that I've had, and I know there's some other folks who can do the same thing. But it really concerned me when I heard all this week and heard these stories, and it just never fails. It just keeps on happening, and I don't understand it. I can't for the life of me. If you know in your heart and in your mind that there's 100% guaranteed method that you can use to keep from getting hurt, why wouldn't you take the time to actually use that method rather than take a chance? But people continue to take chances. They continue to get hurt, and it's just really sad. Well, I'll close out for this one. I'll see if I get any calls or any response to this podcast, and if I do, I can continue on if you like, or we'll move on to something else. But anytime that I can be of any assistance to anybody out there that's listening, just give me a call. I'd be more than happy. We had a really good meeting in Orlando, one of the largest IP conferences we've had in a long time. Golly, maybe forever. I'm not sure, because I've been involved with them for 20 years now, and I've no sitting in that forum that first day at lunch. There was a lot of faces in that audience, and I don't think I've ever seen a crowd quite that big. So we appreciate anybody that was there, and I hope it was a really good turnout for you, and I hope it was worth your time. And also, I'd like to mention the IP forum that we do on the second Friday of each month at 11 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. We just had that last Friday, and we had so many questions come in, we just about ran out of time. We couldn't hardly get to all of them, and they just keep coming, and that's good. That's what this is for, is to try to work through these issues and understand them better, to keep from something happening to, the salt of the earth folks that's out there doing this work and working in this, quote, dangerous environment that we work in. That's what Forbes magazine said, that dangerous conditions, and they were relating that to storm work and storm restoration, tornadoes and hurricanes, things of that nature. And we're going into hurricane season, so I'm sure we're going to all have opportunities here before too much longer. So be good, be kind to one another, look out after one another out there. And, the only thing between you and something bad happening to you is what you think about you're doing. So I'll leave that thought with you. Say goodbye for the time being, and we'll see you next time.
Howdy, partners. The IP Utility Safety Conference is hightailing into Dallas, Texas this October 22nd through the 24th. Register today at utilitysafetyconference.com.
The views, information, and opinions expressed during this podcast are solely those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily represent those of Utility Business Media and its employees. It is strongly recommended that you discuss any actions or policy changes with your company management prior to implementation.